It was a cold December morning in 1951 when the police were called to a modest apartment in St. Petersburg, Florida. Inside, they found the ashes of Mary Reeser, a 67-year-old woman, on her armchair. Her body had been almost completely incinerated, reduced to ash and a few charred remains. Only her left foot, still wearing a slipper, remained intact. Strangely, the rest of the apartment was untouched by fire. The ceiling above was blackened, a plastic light switch had melted, but the furniture and walls stood undisturbed. There was no sign of an accelerant, no foul play, and no clear explanation. How could such a fire burn so hot, so precisely, and yet leave the surroundings virtually untouched? This case wasn't an isolated incident. It became one of the most famous examples of a chilling and largely unexplained phenomenon: spontaneous human combustion, or SHC. Over the decades, dozens of similar stories have emerged. Bodies found almost entirely reduced to ashes, surrounded by rooms that should have been engulfed in flames, but weren't. In 1980, Dr. John DeHaan, a respected fire investigator, attempted to replicate the effects of SHC using a pig carcass wrapped in a blanket. His experiment demonstrated that the wick effect, a process in which body fat acts like a candle's wax, could indeed result in slow, localized combustion. But even DeHaan admitted that this theory didn't explain everything. Not all cases fit the mold. Take the case of Henry Thomas, a retired man from South Wales, found in 1980 in his living room. His body was nearly entirely gone, his head and torso turned to ash. The only parts left were his legs from the knees down, fully clothed, socks still intact. Once again, the surroundings were barely touched by fire. The bizarre consistency in these cases: intense, localized heat, unburned surroundings, partial remains, has baffled investigators and scientists alike. How does a body ignite and burn with such intensity, yet not trigger typical fire? Some have offered scientific explanations: the wick effect, static electricity, gas buildup in the body. But others aren't so sure. Is it possible that something stranger is at play? A hidden force? An internal reaction we've yet to understand? Or perhaps something beyond the physical? A paranormal event, a psychic outburst, or even divine punishment as ancient texts once described? It's these unanswered questions that draw us into the eerie phenomenon of spontaneous human combustion. The more we look, the stranger it seems. And just when we think we have a pattern, a case appears that breaks every rule. In this series, we'll explore the real cases that continue to puzzle investigators and scientists. We'll go deeper into the most mysterious reports, review eyewitness accounts, challenge the scientific theories, and examine whether SHC is truly real, or if it's just a terrifying myth born from tragedy. But before we proceed, what do you think? Could the human body really ignite from within? Or is there a darker explanation? Drop your theories in the comments below. Let's see what the community thinks before we move to the next case. As spontaneous human combustion crept its way into public awareness, so did the need to find a rational explanation. Scientists and investigators couldn't simply accept that people might burst into flames without warning. And so, the wick effect theory was born, a hypothesis that attempted to demystify the phenomenon with the cold, logical hand of science. According to the wick effect, a human body, particularly one with high fat content, can essentially serve as its own candle. Clothing acts as a wick, and once ignited, perhaps by a cigarette, a fireplace spark, or even static electricity, the fat begins to melt and feed the flame. Slowly, steadily, the body is consumed, producing a low, smoldering burn rather than the high-intensity inferno typical of house fires. It sounds plausible. In fact, it is plausible. But as investigators tried to apply the Wick effect to real-life cases, inconsistencies started to emerge. Let's revisit the case of George Mott, a retired fireman from New York who was found reduced to ashes in 1986. George lived alone. No fire had spread through his home. His body was almost entirely incinerated, yet nearby plastic objects were only lightly warped, and a newspaper just feet away remained untouched. There were no signs of struggle, no accelerants, no electrical malfunction. Could the Wick effect alone account for such destruction without triggering a full-blown fire? Or consider the case of Jeannie Saffin, a 61-year-old woman from London who reportedly burst into flames in front of her own father in 1982. Her father claimed flames shot from her mouth like a blowtorch. She died days later from severe burns. This event was witnessed, spontaneous, unprovoked, and terrifying. No cigarette, no fire source, no indication of external ignition. The Wick effect cannot explain flames emerging from the mouth. Unless, of course, something even stranger was at play. If you're fascinated by these unsolved and spine-chilling mysteries, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There are many more bizarre stories waiting to be uncovered, and your support helps keep these investigations going. Hit the bell icon so you don't miss what's coming next. Back to the evidence. Forensic analysis of SHC scenes often reveals a startling truth. Low flames, minimal heat damage to the room, and the peculiar preservation of extremities like feet or hands. In typical fires, the heat is so intense that it consumes everything. Yet in SHC, the destruction seems almost selective. That kind of control in a fire is unnatural. Dr. Wilton Krogman, a forensic anthropologist, once examined an SHC case and stated he had never seen a body so thoroughly destroyed without affecting the environment around it. He described the scene as something out of Dante's Inferno, and he didn't mean that lightly. Despite the Wick effect's popularity in the scientific community, many experts agree that it's an incomplete theory. It may explain some elements of SHC, but it fails to address the full spectrum of anomalies. Why are flames sometimes reported with no apparent ignition? Why do some victims seem to show signs of suffering no pain, remaining seated, or even asleep during the event? Why do these cases appear globally, across different cultures and eras, often with eerily similar characteristics? These unanswered questions form the crack in the foundation of conventional science. They leave the door slightly open to more fantastic explanations, ones involving energy fields, psychic forces, or perhaps phenomena science has yet to identify. As we move forward, the line between myth and science begins to blur. Could it be that the Wick effect is merely a piece of the puzzle? Or are we refusing to accept the full, unsettling truth? In Chapter 3, we'll dive into the most chilling and recent SHC cases, those that have occurred in our lifetime, and we'll examine how modern forensics are still struggling to provide answers. But before we continue, what do you believe? Is science close to solving this mystery? Or is spontaneous human combustion something we still can't comprehend? Let us know in the comments. Your theory might be closer to the truth than you think. As the 20th century gave way to the 21st, one might assume that modern forensics, surveillance, and technology would finally debunk the phenomenon of spontaneous human combustion once and for all. But instead of offering clarity, recent decades have only deepened the mystery. Let us begin with the case of Michael Faherty, a 76-year-old man from Galway, Ireland. On December 22, 2010, Michael was found dead in his living room, completely incinerated. Strangely, the fire had not spread beyond his body. The room itself remained mostly untouched, save for a scorched patch beneath his remains. After months of investigation, the coroner delivered a shocking verdict: spontaneous combustion. It marked the first time in Irish history that such a conclusion was officially recorded. Flaherty's case was particularly haunting. No accelerants were found, no evidence of foul play, and the fireplace nearby showed no sign of recent use. The body was severely burned, yet nearby furniture was barely affected. Investigators were baffled. Was this truly the result of an internal spark? A biological ignition of unknown origin? Across the Atlantic in 2013, a similar event occurred in Mustang, Oklahoma. Danny Van Zant, a 65-year-old man, was found burned to death inside his home. Again, the damage was localized, confined to the body. The sheriff, while cautious, admitted that the possibility of spontaneous human combustion had to be considered. News of the incident quickly spread, reviving public interest and reigniting debate. How is it possible that in the age of smartphones, security cameras, and thermal imaging, we still cannot explain these events? Let's look at the case of John Nolan, a 70-year-old retired construction worker from London. In 2017, Nolan was walking down the street in broad daylight when, according to eyewitnesses, he suddenly burst into flames. Passers-by rushed to his aid, and firefighters quickly extinguished the blaze, but it was too late. Nolan suffered severe burns and died in the hospital. No accelerants, no lighters, no cigarettes were found. The fire department ruled out foul play. Once again, investigators were left without answers. What unites these modern cases is not just the mystery, but the consistency. A single victim, a sudden fire, a confined burn area, minimal damage to surroundings, and the complete absence of an external source. These are not distant tales passed down from the 1800s. These are events that occurred within the last 2 decades, in developed nations under forensic scrutiny and with the eyes of the world watching. Some researchers now point to new theories: spontaneous ketosis, static electricity, mitochondrial malfunctions, or even atmospheric plasma. But these explanations remain speculative. There is no consensus, no unifying theory that fits every detail. Some fringe theorists suggest ball lightning, poltergeist activity, or extraterrestrial involvement. Could it be that we are dealing with a phenomenon that defies our current understanding of biology, physics, or even reality itself? And yet, despite the horror and mystery, SHC remains largely underreported. Why? Perhaps because it challenges the limits of science and logic. Perhaps because accepting it would mean confronting the idea that the human body, our most familiar vessel, can suddenly turn into a deadly inferno without reason. Ask yourself, why do so many of these victims seem to burn in isolation? Why is there often no cry for help, no sign of struggle, no indication that they even moved as they died? Is it truly fire or something else? As we move into the final chapter, we'll confront the uncomfortable possibility that spontaneous human combustion may not be a medical anomaly, or even a natural one. Could it be something intended, something triggered by forces we dare not name? Before we continue, share your thoughts below. If someone you knew spontaneously combusted, and the evidence defied explanation, what would you believe? As the cases of spontaneous human combustion continue to surface, so too do the theories. ranging from the scientifically plausible to the wildly speculative. But in truth, no single explanation has ever satisfied all the questions, and that in itself may be the most terrifying conclusion of all. Let's begin with what science does offer. One popular explanation is the wick effect. According to this theory, a small external source, like a dropped cigarette, ignites the victim's clothing. The human body, rich in fat, then acts like a candle, the fat being the wax and the clothing the wick. This could explain the intense, localized burning and why the body is almost completely destroyed, while the surroundings remain relatively untouched. But this theory, while elegant in concept, has flaws. First, in many SHC cases, no external ignition source is found. No matches, lighters, or candles. Second, the victims often showed no attempt to extinguish the flames or escape, as if the fire came from within, or struck with such suddenness that reaction was impossible. Other theories suggest internal chemical reactions. Perhaps a rare condition or an undiagnosed metabolic imbalance triggers a chain reaction that leads to combustion. Mitochondrial mutations, spontaneous gas buildup in tissues. These are hypotheses, not conclusions. More fringe ideas look to electromagnetic energy or even atmospheric anomalies, pockets of plasma, static charges, or sudden bursts of ionized particles. Could Earth itself be interacting with the human body in a way we don't yet understand? And then, there are the darker possibilities. Some believe SHC is a form of divine punishment, a judgment from beyond. Ancient texts from various religions speak of sinners consumed by fire, not metaphorically, but literally. Others propose that SHC is a byproduct of psychic stress, an outward manifestation of intense, repressed emotion, anger, grief, trauma, so powerful that the body turns it inward and erupts. But the most unsettling theory, that spontaneous human combustion is not spontaneous at all. What if these people were chosen, targeted, tested? There are whispers in conspiracy circles of secret military experiments, weapons of directed energy, and Black Ops technology capable of igniting a person from afar. Is it possible that some of these cases were not accidents, but demonstrations? Could governments be covering up classified technologies, something that causes the human body to combust without leaving a trace? A prototype gone wrong, or worse, a warning made to look like a mystery. Then there are those who claim alien involvement, extraterrestrial beings observing human physiology and testing its limits. In 2021, an anonymous report posted to a fringe forum described a beam of light coming down through a window moments before a man was found burned to death in his armchair. There were no scorch marks elsewhere, only on the body. It was dismissed, of course, as internet fiction. But was it? What if all these stories, scattered across countries, decades, and cultures, are connected? What if someone or something is watching, waiting, learning? We may never know the truth. And perhaps that is the most chilling part of this phenomenon. For all our technology, knowledge, and scientific prowess, we still cannot answer a question as basic and as horrifying as this. Can the human body ignite from within, without warning? And if it can, who's next? Let us know what you think in the comments. Do you believe spontaneous human combustion is real? If so, what do you think causes it? Is it science or something beyond? Some say the mystery will one day be solved. Others say it's better left unsolved. After all, if there's no explanation, there's also no prevention. Sleep well tonight. And remember, sometimes fire doesn't need a match.